delusions. And so for those who do not know, a hallucination is where an individual sees, hears, tastes, or smells something that is not real. And so I was hearing things and I was seeing things. So those are the hallucinations. And then a delusion is where an individual has a false belief related to themselves. And so my hallucinations were about hell. And also my delusions were where I thought I could save the world from any problems. And so during this time, I had been off my medication for about, I would say, 1.5 weeks. And there was an inmate a few cells down from mine, and she would be making this statement saying, "Help me, Jesus." And whenever she said that, it just scared the living daylights out of me. And I associated her saying this with a friend being in the hospital asking me for help. And so the sounds of jail scared the living daylights out of me. And so I was constantly hearing the sounds, and I was associating these sounds with hallucinations. Now, I cannot tell you right now what those hallucinations were, but they were hallucinations, and the sounds just sparked those hallucinations. And it was really a terrifying feeling. And so I do recall sitting at one point, the blood was mostly coming out of my leg, not physically, but I was sitting in a fashion where my behind was on top of my feet. And so when I was admitted into the hospital 6 days later, which would have been June 8th, I could not walk. And so upon entry into the hospital, I could not talk, nor could I feed myself. So I spent a few weeks in the hospital in a wheelchair. This had drifted, and so I had drifted this far downhill. And so this was due to me not having access to my medication. And I will talk about that a little bit later. So what was my career before my arrest? Well, at the time I was working at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. I marketed individual and group ticket sales to potential patrons of the Kennedy Center. Now, my background is in science. I have a BS degree in chemistry from Spelman College and a Master of Science degree from North Carolina A&T State University and in Greensboro, North Carolina, and a PhD in nutrition from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And so after getting my college degree, I worked as a junior staff scientist at an environmental company in Rockville, Maryland, and it was called Dynamat Corporation. And this is where my mental illness first exhibited itself. I was working full time, and at first the mental illness exhibited itself through anxiety attacks while I was at work. I felt like I would faint when the attacks would come. I felt anxious, but thankfully I never did faint, but it did progress to racing thoughts and then suicidal thoughts. And I was 2 hours away from work and home. So it took me 2 hours one way and 2 hours back from home. And so I think due to the lack of me getting a lot of rest, I think that could have attributed to it, but I can't say for sure because, mental illness, oftentimes they say is a chemical imbalance. But anyway, getting back to my story, suicidal thoughts, whenever I was at home, I would get the thought of jumping off the ledge. I was living on the 4th floor, and the thought came to me, what happens if I jump off the ledge? Will I die or will I still live? And so I told my mother about it and what I was experiencing. And she in turn told my uncle, who was a surgeon, and he told me 3 things that I did not want to hear. He told me, you're going to have to see a psychiatrist, Carol. You're going to have to take medication. And at that time, I did not like taking medicine. And then he said, and I told him, I said, well, will I have to move back to North Carolina? And he said, yes. And so this was the last thing I wanted to hear. And so I subsequently spoke to my mother and I told her I felt like a failure because I had to move back to North Carolina. And so my mother and my dad are from North Carolina, and my mother is was a Southern Belle from her heart. And so she told me, she says, I wouldn't feel like a failure. If I were up in that crazy city, I would leave. And so this made me chuckle a bit. And I actually chuckle still to this day after her death. And so after I heard this, I felt a little better. And so my dad was living in DC during the time, and he and my mother agreed for him to briefly stay with me. And so they, in other words, in order to keep an eye on me, if you will. And so I felt safer with my dad there, but this did not stop the racing thoughts nor the thoughts of suicide. But I knew that while my dad was staying with me, I would not jump off the ledge. So I was thankful for that at least. And so during that time, we decided that I moved back to North Carolina, to Chapel Hill. This is my second mom, and I'll get back to her in a second. That is a mistake. She should have, that picture should have gone a little bit further down, and I'll get to that later. But anyway, I moved to Chapel Hill, and for a time, the suicidal thoughts and the racing thoughts stopped for a while. And so I worked as a associate scientist at Mantech Environmental, and that was in Research Triangle Park at the time. So my mother found a psychiatrist for me, and he diagnosed me with obsessive neurosis, and it's now known as obsessive compulsive disorder. And so this is where an individual exhibits repeated actions in order to feel normal. So an example would be repeatedly turning the lights on and off. So after a few months, I began to see another doctor, and he said I had depression. And so while completing my PhD, and also after completing my PhD, I was being treated for depression. And so after graduating with my PhD, I taught at the college level. I taught anatomy, biology, and also physiology. And then from there, I worked at the University of Maryland, Eastern Shore as a project coordinator in the Department of Physical Therapy. And subsequently, I worked at the Johns Hopkins Center on Aging and Health as a senior research program coordinator. So during this time, I felt like I was at the top of my game. I was in management position at one point at one of the top universities in the country, but I was very unhappy. I disliked my job, and I disliked being a supervisor. And so after working at Johns Hopkins, I accepted a position as a executive director of an agency called Out of Many One. And so I worked in an office with other businesses, and this is the particular building, and I was the only employee, or the main employee at my company in this office. And it was very isolating, and there were few people to mingle with throughout the day. And so as a result, I fell into another mental crisis. And this is when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So how did I come to this park bench in front of the office, in front of the lobby, and into the jail? Well, in May of 2011, I met a potential roommate at a church not too far from the hotel. And this roommate told me, because she had once had depression, and she told me, she says, "You never know, God could prevent you from getting your medication, thereby getting you off of your medicine." And I told her, yes, but I know I need my medication. But her statement stayed in the back of my mind. So a few days later, I was visiting my parents in DC, and I tried to refill my prescription at a chain pharmacy. But the pharmacist said that she could not refill my prescription because there was a glitch in the membership portion of my insurance. So I told her, so I cannot get my medication? And so she said no. But I did not get angry, because I remembered what the statement that lady told me. She said, you know, when she told me, "You never know, God could be getting you off your medication." So this is what I thought. And plus I felt healthy. And so this was really a double whammy. But I did not tell my parents about it, because I had 4 medications, and they cost $200 each. And I didn't want my parents to really, pay that out. So anyway, it came for me to go back to the hotel. It may have been like on a Sunday, I think it was. I went back to the hotel because I had to go to work on that Monday. And on June 2nd, I awoke with hallucinations and delusions. I got hot, and I walked out of my room, locking myself out of my room. So I went to the hotel lobby to ask the staff for a key to get into my room, and they were moving so slowly. And this is what it was in my mind. They were moving so slowly. They weren't moving fast enough, and I got angry from within. And I walked out of the hotel lobby, and I walked down a tree-lined street. So it was like a dark street with lined trees leading to and from the hotel. And so one of the staff members followed behind me and said, ma'am, please stop. He said this for about 5 times, and it came to me. I said, I better stop or else he's going to clobber me. So I sat down on the curb and began crying. And I recall him saying, it will be all right. This was little comfort to me at the time, though. So he guided me back to the kitchen where the staff takes their breaks, and they called the ambulance, but the police arrived. Then I was arrested, jailed without my medication, and then transported. This is when I was transported to the hospital. And this is what Western State Hospital looked like when I was admitted there in 2011. So while I was in Western State Hospital, the first couple of days I was there, when lying in the bed and went to sleep, and also lying in the bed the first few days, I felt tremendous heat all over my body. I was so hot that I picked out all of my hair. I literally felt scorching heat all over my body, yet I did not feel any pain while picking out my hair. After my recovery in the hospital, I looked into the mirror and I asked the staff aide, I said, what happened to my hair? She told me you picked it out. And I asked, all of it? She said, yes. I was so surprised to hear this because I did not remember picking out all of my hair. I was literally bald. Even though I studied science and worked in research, which requires an analytical mind, I had lost all rationality. And this is what mental illness can do without proper treatment, such as medication, as in my case. While in the hospital, I felt a true healing over time. I was in hell. Oh, okay, wait, hold on for 1 second. Now this here on the left is what Western State Hospital looked like I said, but now this is what Western State looks like now on the right. So that's the new facility now. But anyway, getting back to my presentation. So, but I was in hell, but my parents were in hell too. While I was living in Fairfax County, Virginia, my dad would call me at the hotel every day. And so before my mental illness, he would call me on my cell. And if he couldn't get me on my cell, he'd call me on the hotel room. So when he called me on my cell and the hotel room and couldn't get me, this is when my parents came to the hotel to inquire my whereabouts. And so the hotel staff told them that I had been arrested. And so I can only imagine the concern that they had within their minds. My mom contacted the Fairfax County Police Department, and somehow she eventually spoke to the public defender, which was my lawyer. And so my lawyer would not tell my parents whether I was arrested or not, because I told my defender, that public defender, that I did not want my parents to know I was in jail. Therefore, my lawyer complied with my request at first. But as my mom pressed her, she then told my parents that I had been arrested. Yet by this time, I was in Western State Hospital. And so my mom and dad had to track me down, to find where I was. And they didn't know if I was dead or alive. And I cannot imagine how they felt. All I can do is to try to imagine. I do recall one day that my roommate at Western State had a visitor, and I thought I wish I could get a visit from my parents. But little did I know, they didn't know where I was. My mom contacted Western State Hospital to see if I were there. So she did talk to the social worker, but the social worker did not tell her whether or not I was in the hospital or not. And the social worker told her, because of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, the Privacy Act, she could not tell my mom if I was in the hospital or not. Now, my mom, my mom used to be a TV news anchor in Atlanta, Georgia. And so the anchor reporter came out in her in that day because my mom told the social worker that, she would go to the news and tell them my daughter is lost in the criminal justice system in Virginia. Needless to say, this social worker called my mom the next day and told her that I was in the Western State Hospital. So when my parents heard this, they wasted no time coming to the Western State Hospital to be by my side. And they came from California. My mom she's a former pastor, and at that time they were in California, but they immediately came to be by my side. And so on the day my parents came to visit me, I recall it was a sunny day, and I recall my mom smiling at me and my dad looking at me through his concern. I recall not talking much, but just smiling and saying, "I'm fine," after they asked me how I was doing. My parents' visit conveyed to me how much they loved me, and this was the motivation I needed to fight to get well. And so while in the hospital, everything is geared toward getting patients well for discharge. And so the hospital staff was very nice and nurturing. I met 3 other patients there. They were girls during my hospital stay, and they taught me how to dance again. And so we had a great time. We were a tight-knit group of girls. And I recall a member of the staff saying, "They are just like a sorority." And hearing this made me happy. All that me and my 3 friends, as well as all of the other patients, wanted was to get well and get discharged from the hospital. I would constantly hear them say, the patients, "I am ready to get out of this place." While in the hospital, the patients and myself were confined to one floor. And this is not the actual floor, but it was similar. And so we could not freely go outside, but when we did go outside, we would probably go outside like once a day, but when we did go outside, the area was fenced off. It was mostly concrete with a small grassy area. They had a small basketball court and 2 picnic tables. And so the basic routine while I was in the hospital was we would rest, we would eat, taking our medications, talking to other patients, looking at TV, coloring, drawing, and writing. And then we also had educational classes. We briefly learned about the criminal justice system laws in Virginia and mental illness, and then constantly learning about the importance of taking our medications and how to navigate regulations at Western State Hospital. This was truly downtime for me. It was a break from the hustle and bustle of life, which at the time was what I needed. This routine allowed me to fully recover. And so on 4th of July, we had a picnic outside. I had a hot dog and also potato chips. Once I bit into the potato chips, I sensed a sigh of relief. I immediately thought, this is what I had when I was at home. But of course, I was not at home. And so, again, the hospital staff was very caring. I recall on one occasion on that day, one of the staff aides told me, "Carol, I told you to grease your hair. This is the only way it will grow." I told her, "Okay." I immediately thought, this is what my mother used to tell me. This time, for some reason, I listened to the aide. From there, I greased my hair, and as time went on, my hair grew back. I'd like to read an excerpt from my book, which is a poem I wrote about the hospital staff that cared for me. It is entitled, "You Brought Me Back to Life." You brought me back to life. When I was down and out, you were there for me. You took care of me when I was in the raw. When all of it was seemingly freaking you out, you had no fear of helping me. Yes, you brought me back to life, and for this, I am so grateful. As I recovered, we were given additional tasks to complete. And an example is learning how to use a washing machine and washing our clothes. And thinking back on my time in jail and in the hospital, I wanted to get out of jail, to get well, and to get out of the hospital. And most of all, I wanted freedom and wanted things to be the way they used to be in my life. Yet this was not to be. Actually, my life would be better, but different. So, discharge. My discharge date finally came. It was July 20th, 2011. Yet at discharge, I had another hurdle to cross. I was in class when my favorite nurse came to call to the class to tell me you're being discharged. I immediately thought, I am gaining my freedom. I felt relief. And she said to me, I will walk you to the discharging area. I was elated. As I walked to the discharging area, I saw a patient who was being admitted into the Western State Hospital. All I could do was pray for him that he would be okay. There was another patient who was being discharged with me. As we walked into the discharging area, I saw two Fairfax County deputies. The moment I saw these deputies, I felt tremendous fear. One of the deputies was standing and the other one was sitting on a sofa. The deputy that was seated looked so mean. I could tell by looking at him, he was not a happy camper. As the deputy stood up, I prayed that he would not process me. Then I saw the other deputy who was standing. When looking at him, I could tell he was a kind deputy by nature. The unhappy deputy processed the other patient, and the kind deputy processed me. The deputy who was working with me told me to turn towards the wall. He told me to lift up my left leg, then my right. I realized that he was shackling my ankles. As I realized this, I looked at the nurse and the unit director. Tears began to flow down my cheeks. The director told me as I looked at him, it's almost over. When he told me this, I thought, how can it be almost over? I'm going back to jail again. I thought I was free, but it was not yet to be. The deputy asked me to turn around to him, and he cuffed my wrist to my waist. I recall telling the deputy, please don't cuff me too tightly to my waist. I'm claustrophobic. He smiled and showed me that I was not cuffed too tightly to my waist. As he smiled and I smiled through my tears. As I looked outside the door, when the deputy was shackling my ankles, I saw a SUV, which was a police SUV, which I thought, we would be transported in. I felt a sigh of relief. I thought at least we would not be transported in a police cruiser, because the police car, the back seat is so small. And again, I felt claustrophobic due to being in a cell and also being handcuffed. But as we walked out and turned to go to the side of the building, it was a paddy wagon. I said, oh my goodness. I said, I have to be transported to jail in a paddy wagon, back to jail to Fairfax. So the only window that the paddy wagon had was just the window in the back. The side of the paddy wagon did not have any windows. And so once in the paddy wagon, me and the other patient smelled a foul stench, and the other patient commented on the smell negatively. I told her, let's think positive, and she did not respond. It was a sunny, bright day. I thought, oh, I could look outside of the circled window from the paddy wagon. Yet the deputy put a checkered flap over the window, shutting out most of the light from the sun. Before the paddy wagon moved, I had to tilt my head downward in order to stay calm and not get anxious. My biggest fear was that I would relapse and be readmitted into the hospital before I left. As I held my head down, I prayed and prayed hard. At every mile marker, the other patient said how many miles we were from Fairfax County. It took us about an hour and a half to get back to jail. Once the van drove into the garage of the jail, I immediately knew that we were there. I immediately felt the dreaded humidity, just as I did 6 weeks prior. I felt immediate fear. The other patient and I, now inmates, were escorted to the lobby area of the jail. We each were handcuffed to the chair that we sat in. There was a police officer who was carrying our medication in clear bags, and he said sarcastically while carrying the bags, "Wow, this is a drugstore." Once I heard his statement, I recalled saying to myself, I am going to put his statement in my book, for which I eventually did. Then there was another police officer who was very kind and escorted me to the women's portion of the jail. Once I arrived to the women's portion of the jail, I met a female police officer, and she said, smiling to me, "Hi, Carol, you look good." I thought to myself, how does she know me? Then I thought, she must have seen me 6 weeks ago when I came into the jail. I asked the officer, do I have to go into the jail cells? She said, I'm afraid so. You have to spend one night. I thought, oh no, I have to go into that dreaded cell. The officer asked me, what size jumpsuit suit and shoes do you wear? I said to myself, I don't know. I've never been in jail before. I changed into this uniform and also the shoes. I was escorted to the doctor's office, and he said to me, how long are you staying? It sounded like he was asking me something similar to what a hotel staff asks guests when checking into a hotel. I told him one night. He looked at me with doubt. Then I immediately responded under my breath, I am getting out of here tomorrow by the grace of God. Then I was escorted to my cell. Upon entering my cell, for the first few minutes, I heard the same inmate I heard the previous 6 weeks, the one who was saying, "Help me, Jesus." Hearing the statement by this inmate brought tremendous fear upon me once again. I associated again, thinking back, the hallucinations that her statement, made me feel, how those that her statement of "Help me, Jesus" made me feel. I immediately thought, she is still here. Where is her family? Then I immediately thought, I thank God for the support of my family. Before leaving the hospital, it was impressed upon me by the staff to take my medication and to take it on time. But each time when I asked the staff at the jail that I needed to take my medication, then the staff member told me that the nurse was not on the floor. And therefore, I did not take my medication that night on time. And so that night, I almost lost my faith. But at that moment, my faith immediately kicked back in, and I knew everything was going to be all right. I did not sleep soundly that night. I would say I only slept about 10 minutes. And so the next morning, I awoke with inmates saying, breakfast, breakfast, breakfast. And I was so excited. Because of their voices, they were so excited. And so I said, oh, it must be good. When I opened the tray, there were pancakes, sausage, and syrup. I poured the syrup onto the pancakes, only to taste that the syrup was very bland. It had no taste. I bit into the pancakes, they were cold and rubbery. I bit into the sausage, it was ice cold. Therefore, I did not eat. I just put the tray aside. Then I laid down and dozed off to sleep again, and I awoke to hear a female police officer calling my name. She says, Carol, are you ready to go to court? And I said, yes. She took one look at me and she says, I will give you a minute. About 10 minutes later, a beautiful Latino police officer who looked like an angel came to my door. And so she came to my door to take me to court. And she told me, you look good. I told her, thank you. It was bittersweet because I thought to myself, it did not have to take all of this. Yet I thought I'm closer to release. As I walked to court, I prayed that my court case would go well. When I walked into court, I looked for my parents, but they had not arrived at the time of my court proceedings. Then I prayed that God would touch the heart of the judge and my lawyer. So during the proceedings, my lawyer said that I had never been in the criminal justice system, and the prosecutor said, yeah, she doesn't even have a traffic ticket. So the judge said, I set bail at $500. I immediately thought, I don't want my parents to pay that amount of money. So I said, Lord, please let him reduce the bail. So then the judge said, I set bail at $100. So all I could do was thank God for reducing the bail. Then my lawyer walked over to me and said, how are you? You look good. I told her thank you. Again, it was bittersweet. My case ended in a null pros, which means the prosecutor will no longer prosecute. Then I was escorted back to the jail cell in handcuffs. And so the police officer who has escorted me told me, it may take a few hours, but you are leaving today. I smiled and said, okay. Finally, a police officer came to my cell and escorted me where I was fingerprinted and took a picture taken, which was my mugshot. When the officer taking my picture said smile, I did not want to smile at all, but I did. Then the police officer told me, it's almost over. She escorted me to the exit doors and she said, see, after you go through those doors, you're free. That is all I needed to hear, free. I told the officer, thank you for taking care of me. As I walked through the double glass doors, I was concerned if my parents would be waiting for me. As I walked out of the doors, I saw my dad, my mom, and my aunt, my dad's sister. Then I smiled with joy, and also I hugged them and I was elated. Before I walked through the double doors, my dad later told me that he told my mom and his sister, my aunt, that I would say thank you to the officer. Then when I actually walked through the door, he heard me say thank you to the officer. I think by him hearing me say this to the officer, he felt a burden was lifted. As my dad drove us from Fairfax County Jail to DC, I looked at the statues and also the monuments and thought, this is freedom. All I could do was to thank the Lord for my freedom. Then I thought, if only President Obama knew what I went through. And at that time, he was in office. But then I immediately thought, God knows what I went through, and that's all that matters. And mostly important, I have my freedom. So, my change and recovery. After my ordeal, I was a changed person, literally. My life had changed forever. I was more empathetic, more caring, and identified with the simple things of life more. I was stronger mentally. I knew I had to take my medication possibly forever. And additionally, my occupation had changed forever. I worked part-time jobs for about 5 years. And in 2016, I worked a full-time job at Homestead Senior Care as a trainer. It was a great job until I was laid off. But then I went into caregiving. I worked as a caregiver for a couple of years. And then I worked that part-time in addition to working as a behavioral therapist. And so I began working as a behavioral therapist in 2018, teaching autistic children communication skills and also behavior modification. And now I work in the educational system, elementary school system with special needs children. And I do enjoy that. So getting to prevention crisis, how to avoid a prevention crisis, how to avoid a mental crisis. And this is what I think would help. And I'm sure there are others, but this is what I identified. I would say attend all of your doctor's appointments regularly. See a psychotherapist or counselor just to talk to, because with the psychiatrist, he'll only see you for about 15 minutes to update you on your medications or change your medications. But a psychotherapist or counselor you can talk to for a period of time. And then I would say, if you're on medication, eat 3 balanced meals a day. That helps me a lot, especially if you're taking medications. And if you're fasting, some churches fast. I would say talk to your doctor first, because I'm speaking from experience, actually, because in January, I went on a corporate fast with a church that I was attending, and I got dehydrated. I didn't ask my doctor if I could do it. And then when I told her, she says, so you see, you need to, so she scolded me lightly. Okay, that's basically what happened. And so also stay hydrated with water, take your medications and take them on time if possible. I would say to you to ID the types of things you like to do. This will keep you engaged, motivated, so you don't stay in the bed all day. And know your triggers, that will send you spiraling down mentally. I would say identify 1 or 2 people who are your emergency contacts, and identify 1 or 2 people who know specifically your condition and what hurts and helps your condition. And also that they can know when to call the doctor, and also that they can be your advocate should you become ill in the hospital. And also, I would say have a power of attorney. They will act on your behalf should you have to go into the hospital. And so I think that would help. Now, my most recent stay was in March. I was slated to do this presentation in March, but I got sick. My medication stopped working. I had been on that medication for 10 years and it stopped working. And also I had a little stress on the job, so that sent me into the hospital for 28 days. But thankfully I came out, and while I was in the hospital, I wanted to do some things that I needed to do to keep me calm. And I did daily facials with the soap and lotion. So that relaxed me. So you have to find the things that, you like to do and that are specific to you that will help you in that term. Now, so in keeping, the reason why I think that I had to go through this was, number one, to be a voice of hope, and also to educate, not only that, but it was a desire for me to educate police officers. And ironically, in the county that I was arrested in, I was able to educate the police officers about my story through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So thankfully that worked out. And I did that for about 2.5 to 3 years. And I have gone into the community, work and spoke to civic organizations to let people know that recovery is possible. And then also my aunt, my dad's sister, who has since passed, she told me the same day I was released, I would write a book about your ordeal. And so I did. And my book is entitled PhDs Have Bipolar 2, My Story. I have another book that I wrote right after my mother's death, and that is entitled Poems Inspired by Mother, and both can be ordered online via Amazon.com. Thank you. Roxana?
Yes, so I put the 2 links in the chat, and I just want you to know, while you were telling your story, I was just like shaking my head, because for the life of me, I'm like, I can't understand why you ended up having to go through all of that.
I know. Yeah,
it's
but
upsetting.
And then when I called my insurance agency to get after I got out of jail and all this other stuff, I called the insurance agency to get the glitch taken care of. You know what she told me? There was never a glitch. Never.
So, do you remember what I told you when we had talked originally, that happened to my son, and his medication had run out? He didn't tell me he's 18, y'all. He tells me everything late. And his doctor's office called and said, no, he can get 10 days medication, Dr. Ray. No, he said, yeah. All you have to do is tell them that the other doctor can't call, but this is what you're allowed to do. That's your right. And I said, I don't know if that started just recently.
Wow.
But that's your right, guys. If you run out of medication, your pharmacy can give you the 10-day pill. 1 day pill, 2 days pill until you talk to your doctor, until you get the stuff straight with your insurance.
Wow.
But that's just sad that the
Hmm.
pharmacy didn't know that.
That's right. Exactly. And I think
Like they
that's
didn't
the
know,
issue.
okay, you don't have to buy $200 right now. Listen, take this sample or do this, go to the doctor's office, get a sample until X, Y, and Z. It's like they don't even try to help problem solve. And I think that's where NAMI comes in as such a great tool of advocacy, because you're telling the story. I am pretty sure those doctors and even the hospital workers, they really appreciate that you saw them, that the police officers just, they, that coldness does not help in that
That's
situation,
right.
and it just escalates it and makes it
It
worse.
does. It does. Yeah, exactly. So,
So I know we have a few people that are commenting in the chat. We have 2 people on YouTube. So thank you guys for joining us. Do you guys have any questions? And I can totally see how you are helping children that are autistic or have special needs to really hone in on their power. Like what more of a piece for you as a researcher, and you know, all those
it
pieces
is.
of biology that you've been learning all this time. I can just so see you flowing in that.
I love it. I connect with them, you know, and I'm wondering, is it because I have a mental illness that I connect with them?
Yeah.
You know, I
Okay,
did
so we
not.
do have a question.
Okay.
Did you have mental health challenges as a child?
You know what? In thinking back, I did not think I did, but I think so, because I think I had obsessive neurosis, which was undiagnosed. And really, growing up, we didn't talk about mental illness in with my doctors, you know. And looking back, I think I did have obsessive neurosis, but it was undiagnosed. Yeah.
And they said we had done a presentation about mental health for kids, and one of the psychologists at NIH had said you usually see signs as young as 9,
Wow.
but like the family doesn't like process it as I need to follow up or get more support for that.
Well, you know, too, my mother didn't know I was doing obsessive neurosis anyway. I would be constantly turning the lights on and off. That's why I was going to give that example, you know. And I just did, you know, and I was obsessed with her dying. I just worried about that. I was obsessed with going to funeral. I hated funerals. I hated looking at caskets. So I think there was something there, and you know, I didn't tell her, so how would she know? Or I didn't tell my dad, how would he know? You know.
And those are normal things as well. Like kids play with light switches.
Yes.
They don't like sitting still at funerals. And who does like to? So it's like a fine line, and that's what the psychologist was talking to us about. That, you know, it's like just really kind of observing the child, giving them support, because it's like a fine line between knowing when it's mental illness, and then you have to get support so they can have the tools, like you were saying, knowing the triggers, knowing that the family has to help them stay on a schedule so they can get the proper rest, eating the right foods, because really a lot of the things that we go through is just the stuff that we're eating or we're not eating. We wait until we're starving, y'all. Like hangry is a thing, because you wait till you're so, oh, I'm on edge, what's wrong with me? You're getting shakes, everything. So yeah, that definitely makes. And we have another question. What do you think Black people need to know about taking mental health medication?
I think medication is good. Now, the thing is, everybody may not need medication. I think you need to see a doctor first. And also, what happened when I first saw the doctor that I had, I wanted him to be a Christian. And so I went in interviewing him. You know, and so you have to, you know that you have power too. And so I asked him, I said, are you a Christian? So he said, yes. I said, okay. And that's when I got him as a doctor. And then I trusted him to, see, basically to provide me the correct medication. And I think it's okay to do the medication. It helped me, and so I would say first, pray about it, but then I think you definitely need to follow it up with taking medication if need be. But speak to your doctor first.
Yeah, and I think if you have someone you trust, it will make a world of difference because then you're not questioning everything they're saying. I know as a parent, when I was taking my son to the doctor, I had psychiatrists I didn't trust. So it was like, and
Mhm.
I worked at the Black Mental Health Alliance. So it was just like, once I found a nurse practitioner that I trust her with my son's life. Like if she tells me, no, you don't need this. Yes, you need this. I can
Uh-huh.
trust her because we have that relationship. And there's not a question where, oh, they told me this wrong thing. If someone tells you information you're not comfortable with, it's fine to get a second opinion.
That's right.
You research things as well by yourself.
That's right.
So we have Miss Morgan from YouTube. She said she just had a couple of responses. This is true. They barely listen to customers. All we got was a scolding. I think she was talking about mental health when we were
Okay.
younger. And hangry is definitely a thing. We would not be evil to people and cuss people out if we just eat the right thing, drink our water. Look, I have my water
Yes.
bottle here. Because that makes us be what do you call it? Not equal, but balanced.
Yes.
Balanced, guys. Yeah. So Miss Tracy said, I'm so elated that the stigma of mental illness is getting better. Yes. And our young people do better with that than we do.
Yeah.
And I think that's good because then they have space to get healing where before if you were going through things, people didn't talk about it. And then it's like, how would you know? So now like, oh, if somebody has a crisis, what
Mhm.
are some of the things you could do to help them? Just like my eyes were like coming out of my head when you said the hotel had actually called for ambulance to give
Yeah.
you support, but the police came. Like that's
Yes.
just so much. And then we have another question here.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on faith-based community as it relates to mental illness?
I think it is very good. I think it's good, but I think the pastors need to be educated because some of them are not educated in that respect, and not by the fault of them, because mental illness is up and is coming, and they just never had a chance to deal with it with their parishioners. But I think that it's good, but pastors also need to know that prayer is good, but sometimes with some people that's not the only thing. Medication is needed. Okay. I went to a pastor. My story about that is I went to a pastor because I was seeking to get these racing thoughts out of my head. This was after I moved to North Carolina. And so he says, well, I will call you. And I said, okay, can you call? So I was seeking, help then. He says, I'll call you tomorrow. And then so he says, well, you pray about it. Pray. I said, okay, but see, with my condition, I couldn't only pray. I
Right.
had the medication, and I think he should have been aware. He needed to be aware of resources that he could suggest to me to go. And so I think faith-based is good. I prayed, and I prayed, and I'm a Christian, so I prayed, and I said, Lord, help me to get these off. But it, stop these racing thoughts. That didn't stop. I still had the suicidal thoughts, and it didn't stop. Even though I prayed, it didn't stop. So I think, with some people, you still need the medication, but I think faith-based is good. It gets to the Black community, and I think it's excellent because
And
the Black church is so wonderful to our community. They are leaders, and
yeah.
they can really bring about destigmatization of mental illness. They have that power.
And I think it's a fine line because yes, some of it is getting spiritual counseling.
Mm-hmm.
But like our church, Freedom Church, they do yes, you have sessions with the pastor, but when my mom died, that was traumatic to me. The pastor, I didn't go to see him for to talk to him about that, but I was just telling him that I was feeling down. And he said, oh, well, we do we gift our people 3 sessions with a therapist. And I thought, oh my God, what a
Uh,
blessing to know you don't have to think about, oh, I had to find money to get a therapist, or
Oh,
but just knowing that he knew he could not carry that or help someone but for a certain amount. I
you.
really like that idea of, yes, I can counsel you, but here's
Ah.
extra support.
Oh my goodness. Before I moved down here, my pastor at my church was open to mental illness. And so he was trying to engage the conversation. And so unfortunately, I couldn't continue with that, but I'm going to surely take that back to him if you don't mind. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and certain therapists will donate their time or
Uh-huh,
do like a wellness check-in. And I think that's something that is
uh-huh.
easy for churches to implement. So just like NAMI, we're not, or if you're a mental health first aid response person, right? You don't have to be the expert, but you just have to know,
Yes.
wait, you need a little bit more help. Look, this is
Yeah.
a phone number that you can call, text for support. And that's what we do at Black Mental Health Alliance. I'm not an expert, but I know the experts like Dr. Ray. I can refer someone. Oh, I know someone who went through that. Here, let me connect you with them. And I
Oh,
think
wonderful.
in the Black community, we do really well with that. And in the Black church, like you said, they're leaders in it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Chiffon said, everyone I know who has mental health issues, males especially, don't stick with a medication routine to see if the meds will work. My
Mm-hmm.
nephew got killed, and I believe in part to him not being on medication management program long enough to allow it to work.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Education is the key. Yeah.
And it does take a while when you're getting medication to balance or to start working, and just like Dr. Ray said, you can use it for a certain amount of time, and
Mhm.
after a while you'll need something else, and it's nothing
Yes.
that you did wrong, but yeah,
Mhm.
that's something you have to work through as well.
Mhm.
Tanisha said there's a medical piece as well as incorporating coping mechanisms in anything that brings your joy into the mix. Education is key.
Yeah.
Morgan from YouTube, getting beyond the veil of seeing treatment as a weakness is still a major
Mhm.
challenge.
It
This
is.
is in this these are improving unless they're rich and famous. There is still a stigma even when professionally in the mental health community.
Mhm.
And I believe that. A lot of people, they won't because they're scared to lose their clearance. A lot of police
Yeah.
officers won't because they don't want to be switched out of their position.
Yeah.
So it definitely still is a stigma.
It is. It is. And I think the more you talk about it, the better, especially in our community.
Because I think even if, let's say, you do lose that position or you end up going to something else, I think it's something better for you out there that's a better fit. And
Yeah.
just think about how miserable you are when you're depressed or miserable you are when you're in a mental health crisis
Yeah.
compared to getting help and feeling stabilized. It's
Yes.
like we have to really choose our wellness and our wholeness.
Yes.
So I don't see any more questions. Do you see any, Dr. Ray?
Okay. I don't see anything coming out of the chat.
I'm just looking here.
Okay. Oh, what is that?
I have
Oh,
experienced so many support group participants share horror stories of how their pastors or parishioners have said to just pray it away and the devil is possessing the individual. That's scary. And I agree.
oh, yeah.
I agree. It's dangerous. Do you feel like you can be in a relationship with bipolar?
I
So I'm
okay.
going to let Dr. Ray respond to that one. And I'm going to respond with what our other talk had revealed. So go ahead.
I'm speaking for myself only. I think I can, but I think also I would want my husband, or I say husband when I get one, but I would want my husband to know all that I've gone through so that he can be my confidant, but then also where he can help me. Now, I was thinking maybe I would want him to somehow have that previous background so that he will know the triggers and all of that. But it's not a mandatory that he has that, that background. The only thing I want him to know is don't be afraid of me because I have bipolar.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much, we had Defying the Silos talk that was a real talk about bipolar as well. And I was telling Dr. Ray this before we got on the Zoom that really it's like you have to make sure you're taking care of yourself and doing all the knowing your triggers, knowing what you need to eat, that you need to get rest, all of those things. And then that other person needs to know that you have this mental diagnosis, but that's not all of you, right? And I think it is possible, but you just have to make sure that both of you are on the same page of where you are in your maintenance of the diagnosis. I don't think that it's a death sentence. This lady had said the doctors had told her she wouldn't be able to get married, she wouldn't be able to have kids, and I was like, wow. But then she went and did that but what does she do? She has a strict schedule. She makes sure that she goes to bed certain times, that she eats healthy. So it's like she made sure she was doing the work. She takes her medication. So it's like she just had to put in herself what was important for her. And so I dated someone with bipolar unknowingly to me, and it was so scary. I was afraid that mental health issue. It is a huge challenge sometimes trying to relate to someone who sometimes display hard times. Right.
Yeah. And see, he was probably not taking his medication, because if I'm without my medication, you will see a different Carol. And a lot of times it's when I will be angry. It will first start out with me talking fast and talking incoherently, but then also I'm not as calm. I'm very angry, and see, that's the chemical imbalance. Right. And it's not my fault. It's just the fact that it's just the chemical imbalance, and so that's where the medication comes in. I know I'm gonna have medication, and I don't want to say forever, but if it's forever, I'm keeping that option open, because I'd rather stay healthy than be the other way. And I think.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I think too is that when people hear bipolar, it's a severe condition, yes, but it gets I think a bad rap because people go off their medications and they just go, haywire, unfortunately. But medication, I'm still pushing medication because I'm on medication. It's helped me so much.
And not to beat people who get off medication, they feel good, right? They're progressing, they're feeling like, I have a good handle on it. So that's why, but that's also the catch-22, because it's a balance there. So maybe they can, we don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm just saying that's what makes them get off. It's not because they're just like, I don't care about this, I don't want to do it anymore. No, it's like, oh, I feel good. I have a good handle on it. So Tanisha said, this is why support groups for family and friends and individuals with diagnosis is so important, providing tools to interact and support your loved ones. Mm-hmm. A holistic approach is very important. Mind, mental health, wellness, body, proper nutrition, soul, spiritual connection.
Yes.
And I think don't blame moms for saying pray. My mom said the same thing. I remember telling her distinctly, I said, oh, I'm really worried about Michael, my son. He's suicidal. Well, you're just not praying. You need to fast and pray. And I was like, I remember being like, I don't think that's going to help, because I remember how down he was, guys. If you've been through that phase with someone, it's like, you just know that that's not what it is. And they're in such a dark space. You're really scared that you're going to lose that person. So I was like, so don't be mad at moms for saying that. They're just trying from their point of reference the best they can. So I didn't hold that against her. I just knew, okay, I need to find, Yes, I'm going to pray, Mom. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. But and I didn't tell her that part. And a lot of times you're not going to be able to share that with your family. Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You'll know the family that you can say stuff to. And when you say something and they make you feel bad or like, why are you doing that? Then you just know not to tell them about that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wrongly given the label of bipolar by a therapist who was fired for being on a controlled substance that day. They left this false designation in my records. How do I get emancipated from this tyranny?
Oh, I don't know. Can you repeat that? I don't know if I can answer that.
I was wrongly given the label of bipolar by a therapist who was fired for being on controlled substances that day. They left this false designation in my records. How do I get emancipated from this tyranny?
I'm not sure.
Oh yeah. So Tanisha said get reassessed. I was about to say, I think going to a different provider and going through a different screening,
good.
right?
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, we don't know the whole thing because is it a program that you had to use that person? I can imagine that you can find someone else to reassess you.
That's a good point. That's a good idea. Thanks, Tanisha.
Let's see. Oh, wow. Morgan said, and by all means, don't marry a narcissist who will use your diagnosis against you.
That's right. That's key.
You feel good until you don't. That is so true. We have to really pick our partner well. Yes. I think that's for everyone too, but yes, because definitely if you already are going through things, that's not going to be helpful for you be paired with someone does not care about you and that's using your mental illness against you.
That's exactly right. I agree.
So thank you, Morgan. Yes. Morgan, somebody in the chat said, preach, Morgan.
Yes, I agree with that.
So we're just wrapping up. Okay, the line between religious belief and mental health management needs to be explored. I met several people with schizophrenia who are religious fanatics, even taking on characters of religious people as their identities. We need to educate the religious population. I would love to understand where the religious fanaticism comes into play with mental illness of this kind. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think so the summer is great for these topics. So now that you guys are saying that, I'm thinking in my head who we can find as a expert in that field to talk about schizophrenia. I don't remember us doing a lot through the Black Mental Health Alliance about highlighting people that have gone through bipolar. Maybe that's our next top diagnosis that we need to highlight is what is that part of schizophrenia that makes people assess about certain characters of the Bible, because there is that obsession with religion with that.
That's right. That's right.
And so in wrapping up, Dr. Carol, do you have any takeaways you want us to remember?
Let's see. What do I, as far as my presentation? Okay,
yes.
Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. Yeah, as far as crisis prevention, some of the things that I do is I know my triggers. I'm still working on that, but I do know that negative stress is a trigger for me. And so my friend told me that when I went in March to the hospital, he told me when I was talking to him over the phone, he says, Carol, you don't sound right. He says, get somebody over there now and go to the hospital. So my cousin, thankfully, who lives in the area, came to get me and her husband and her brother, and they took me to the hospital. So, know your triggers. Also, know the things you like to do. Do those things that you like to do. And for me, I like listening to R&B, gospel music, and pop rock, soft rock. And also, it came to me about a month ago to go roller skating for exercising.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so I do the walking piece, but I want to do something. And so I had competed in high school in roller skating. So, I said I know I'll do that. So I'm going to order my roller skates at some point and go roller skating. I went roller skating one time, and that was about last week, I think it was. So I think I'm listing that. So I like to do that. And also I designed there after my mother had passed, I started designing greeting cards. So that's therapeutic for me. So I do that. So I'm doing things that are therapeutic for me to keep me out of the hospital, and I like to write. And so that's where the books came from. So, yeah. And so those are the things. But the thing is that those things that I like to do did not come overnight. It did not come
Right.
overnight. It evolved into this, to more than one. It started out with one thing that I like to do, and then it progressed to all the others. So just do the things that you like to do. You'll have a happier life. Follow your medication, do what the doctor says, and that's it.
Yes, and I also yesterday we had went to Buy Right to pick up some wings, just some little stuff, and I saw hula hoops, and I was like, "Oh my God, wouldn't it be fun for us to try some hula hoops?" And when I came home, like my kids are older now, and my 22-year-old, 21-year-old, 19-year-old were like, "Why did you buy that?" I was like, so we could try them, and they had so much fun, even though they couldn't figure out how to do it. But it's like
Oh,
it just made me think about roller skating when you're little, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm
yes,
roller skating." So
exactly.
that's such a great idea.
Yeah, so I'm excited.
And so, yes, guys, we have the recording will be sent out. What I'll do is I'll either add it to the newsletter so that more people will be able to view it because it's a Saturday. And
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people, especially if they have young kids, they're ripping and running. We will have the video out to share. It's also will be on YouTube, but I'll add, if you are on our Zoom list, that's the good thing because I can send you the follow up for that. But yes, the recording will be shared.
Thank you so
And
much.
so also we're going to give away 2 books. We're going to give away the poems inspired by my mother, and the PhDs have bipolar 2, my story. So what we'll do is we'll put all the electronic emails in a hat, pull it out. I'll have my not intern, my program assistant do it. So I won't cheat. I'm not going to look at anyone's name. She's going to do it. And then we'll reach out to you to get your address. So connecting with a therapist is such an important part. Yes, so, connecting with a psychiatrist as well. Black Mental Health Alliance, for our referral database, we have a partnership with the Black Psychiatrist Association. So we're
Wow.
able to connect you with a culturally affirming therapist or psychiatrist. If you want to call us, 443-827-6732 is a call or text phone number to connect with the therapist. Miss Cheryl Maxwell will answer the phone. She's a therapist herself and be able to connect you with someone who takes your insurance, who's still accepting new clients, and in your area. So a lot of people like the virtual, but like, let's say you don't want to be virtual for that meeting, she can connect you with that person. So you could also reach out to us, info@blackmentalhealth.com, or fill out the Google form and she will connect you with someone. But there is help out there. You don't have to go through it by yourself. You don't have to be the expert. You can get experts to help you be an expert at what you're going through. So, and then thank you guys for all your positive comments. And this is just the referral line. At the end of this, if you enjoyed Dr. Ray's story, her presentation, please give us feedback because that's what makes us be allowed to do more trainings like this. I hear you about the schizophrenia topic. You'll also be able to suggest upcoming topics, and that will be sent to you at the end of this presentation when you close out the screen. So you know what? I actually will just send out a separate email with a follow-up with this training because I did give you a couple of flyers, like the 988 fact sheet, making a safety plan if somebody's suicidal, that you can share with family members, help them through those steps. So I think I will just do a separate email. I think that'll make it a little bit easier. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for spending your Saturday. Do you see all your comments in this section?
I do. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope I helped you.
Yes, yes, yes. I think you did. I really believe that we have to just keep doing these safe spaces, forums, because we learn from each other as well. And even everyone that was putting in the chat, in Morgan from YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Because we learn from each other and we really build on the knowledge that each of us have.
Amen. Thank you.
So thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you,
Happy Saturday.